Is it just me, or has horror movie marketing gotten really irritating? I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little bit sick of being told I'm about to see the scariest horror movie to ever be scary, only to sit down in the cinema and not see much more than a couple of lights turning on and off for about an hour. I'm also tired of being shown every single jump scare condensed into 2-minute trailers and having major twists revealed before I even know the movie's title. Fortunately, not every marketing campaign is like this, so let's take a closer look at the world of horror movie marketing. Hi, I'm Nia, aka Nia the Bog Witch, and I like to ramble about horror movies. You can find me basically all over the internet under the name Nia the Bog Witch, so come over and say hi. In this video, I want to talk about horror movie marketing done right, where it's been done wrong, and with the rise of social media, what strategy film studios should take, in my humble opinion as a horror fan, going forward. I'll be referencing Ian London's 2024 book, Hollywood Online, Internet Movie Marketing Before and After the Blair Witch Project a fair bit, which I'll just refer to Hollywood Online to save us all time. But first, let's quickly go over the history of horror movie marketing and how it's developed over time. In the early days of cinema, film studios mostly marketed their films through star power, print, and posters. In the 1960s, the movie trailer as we know it today became popular, with Stanley Kubrick being amongst the trendsetters who decided to start cutting together fast-paced montages of their work. Until this point, movie trailers have mostly just consisted of promotional scenes from films with descriptive, sensational text and dramatic score over the top. When it comes to horror movies, film studios, especially independent ones, have always had to get a little creative with how they market their motion picture. In fact, despite B-movies proving to be profitable in the 50s, the horror genre didn't really start to get taken seriously by big studios until the 1960s, with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, or arguably even the 1970s with the success of The Exorcist. Without huge financial backing, marketing campaigns for horror movies mostly relied on gimmicks, such as handing out free vomit bags at screenings of Michael Armstrong's Mark of the Devil and not allowing cinema-goers to enter the screening if they were late. This generated word-of-mouth buzz and news articles, basically free press, which is invaluable if you're trying to market your movie with not much more than thoughts, prayers, and hypnosis, a fact that still rings true today. In the 1970s, large film studios realised that TV advertising was the move if they wanted to create demand for their movie. Skip forward to the early 1990s, and with the popularisation of computers and the internet, we saw computer press kits and later interactive media kits. These were digital press kits such as floppy disks or CD-ROMs and later websites that were designed for journalists to learn about an upcoming film and help spread word of mouth rather than potential fans. In the mid-90s, we saw filmmakers utilise the internet to build an audience through interactive websites and forums that were targeted at fans. Smaller studios used these websites as a way to gain support and garner a loyal fan base, while larger studios still preferred to avoid fan engagement and to use these sites to gather data on fan behaviour, retain control of their material, and sell merchandise. However, it is worth mentioning that the distributors behind horror films still tended to avoid marketing strategies that were seen as unpredictable or risky, which at the time, the internet was. Until the late 1990s, according to Ian London in his book Hollywood Online, horror fans generally had little to no role to play on the studio's official channels, other than as potential customers. They wanted to retain control over their marketing campaigns, and they felt it safer not to engage with fans. One exception to this was John Carpenter's Halloween website, established in 1997, which had a discussion board and encouraged feedback from fans. It wasn't until the late 90s that independent film studios such as Haxan Films with the Blair Witch Project really began to recognise how important cultivating a loyal, interactive internet fanbase could be. We'll discuss this more in a bit. In the 2000s, social media entered the chat, and going viral via online fan support has become a vital part of most movies' marketing campaigns, especially in the horror space. Now, even with financial backing, with each horror film promising to be scarier than the one released last week, film studios are having to think outside the box to get horror fans intrigued enough about their movie to actually pay money, in this economy, to go and see it at the cinema or, in even more recent years, buy or rent it via video on demand. We'll go into some of these campaigns later on. While a lot more goes into marketing movies than just the trailer, I do want to quickly highlight how trailers specifically should work, because I discuss them a lot in this video, and most of these factors can be applied to most marketing campaigns aside from the trailer. Making a successful horror movie trailer comes down to 4 key factors. 1. Making a strong first impression, since most people make up their mind in the first 5 to 10 seconds. The last few seconds are the ones that usually stick with people the most, so starting and ending the trailer in a way you want people to remember is crucial. 2. Triggering an emotion, most notably fear if it's a horror movie. People are more likely to hang on to the way something makes them feel rather than purely on what they saw or heard. 3. Teasing rather than telling. Trailers are supposed to intrigue and entice. They're meant to give you a taste of what's in store, not flat out give you the synopsis complete with major spoilers. 4. Creating FOMO, the fear of missing out. This is often created by showing social proof such as early screening reactions or quotes from reviews, which is basically marketing 101. I can vouch for this because I have a boring amount of experience in this area. The issue with a lot of modern horror films I find is that they're missing the mark when it comes to factors 3 and 4. They're showing us way too much in the trailer, which detracts from the tension when we watch the actual movie, and the social proof being used feels hollow, clickbaity, and disingenuous. It feels as if there's currently a disconnect between the marketing of the horror movie and the movie itself. I'll go into what horror movies are doing wrong in my opinion later. On a more positive note, let's look at what they're doing right. We cannot start a video about horror movie marketing without talking about 1999's The Blair Witch Project. Not only is Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez's found footage horror regarded as a juggernaut in its category for its chilling storyline and cinematography, but also for its aggressive marketing strategy. A marketing strategy that I don't think would actually be allowed to run today. You see, unlike some of the movies I'll be mentioning, when Myrick and Sanchez first created The Blair Witch, they didn't have the multi-million-dollar backing of a massive film studio like Universal or Paramount. They, along with 3 other film graduates, made The Blair Witch through their own independent company called Haxan Films. So, before their picture was snapped up by Artisan Entertainment, they had to take matters into their own hands in order to spread the word. In 1998, they started a website that would go down in not just horror movie history, but film history as a whole, BlairWitch.com. Now, contrary to popular belief, the Blair Witch's website wasn't the first movie website or even first successful website used to promote a film during the internet's infancy. Notably, Stargate and Star Trek Generations both enjoyed major success with their respective websites in 1994 for very different reasons. It also wasn't the first independent horror movie to turn to non-traditional methods to drum up support. Lance Wheeler and Stefan Avalos, who wrote and directed 1998 mockumentary The Last Broadcast, had no connections to any major film studio and next to no money. I mean, the film only cost $900 for Christ's sake. So they were forced to self-distribute. In order to do this successfully, they built a website themselves where fans could discuss theories surrounding the film and create intrigue. It wasn't used to sell products or position fans merely as consumers. It gave them a voice and made them an integral piece of the puzzle, which was also a massive part of Haxan's strategy with BlairWitch.com soon after. While it wasn't the first, BlairWitch.com's success was unprecedented and signalled the direction in which the marketing of independent horror movies would go in the future. Websites were great for smaller independent film studios as they were cost-effective and low risk. They could be cobbled together and run in-house. BlairWitch.com cost just $15 a month to run and was built by the filmmakers themselves. Like The Last Broadcast, BlairWitch.com started out as a way for Haxan Films to build their reputation as filmmakers and cultivate a fan base. This is where an important distinction needs to be drawn. As Ian London talks about in detail in his book, there's a common misconception that the Blair Witch was always marketed in a way that blurred the lines between fact and fiction, and that this is why its campaign was so successful. This isn't true. Initially, BlairWitch.com was a place for fans to discuss theories and read about the legend of the Blair Witch, but at this point, for the most part, they never truly believed that the events of the film were actually real. The first iteration of the website was inspired by a campaign Haxan ran on John Pearson's Bravo show Split Screen in 1997, called The Story of the Black Hill Disappearances. After this was televised in April 1998, they had some financial backing and an enthusiastic fan base who wanted to know more. Thus, the website, which was mainly used to funnel people to discussion boards, was born. The fans were loyal and passionate. They took word of mouth to a whole new level. They commented on other websites like IndieWire in order to recruit, rang into talk shows, and created fan sites, all to promote Haxan's project. They loved being able to interact with filmmakers in real time and were genuinely instrumental in the film's promotion early on. Haxan therefore continued to share more backstory on the legend of the Blair Witch, such as Heather's journal entries, which they placed behind hidden links, black and white forensic style images of Josh's abandoned car, and recovered footage. However, I want to reiterate at this point, fans were still very much aware that this film was a work of fiction. This was until shortly after Sundance in January 1999, when independent film company Artisan bought the distribution rights for $1.1 million, and ownership of BlairWitch.com was turned over to them. Artisan removed the community element of the website, leaving just the backstory. Therefore, new fans visiting the site had no way of telling whether the film was fact or fiction, and, in a bid to maximise marketing potential, Artisan leaned into this. The Blair Witch's marketing campaign then saw the fictional legend of the Blair Witch being portrayed as genuine. Newsreel-style interviews from alleged local residents and fake police reports about 3 students who allegedly went missing when researching the legend of the Blair Witch were now presented without a single disclaimer. They deliberately didn't even make merch so that they could operate under the illusion that the footage being displayed was real. A 45-minute mockumentary called Curse of the Blair Witch was released on the Sci-Fi Channel. Artisan created missing person posters with links to the website on them that were shown at 40 US colleges, a strategy that was later repeated at the Cannes Film Festival, and the actors' IMDb pages reflected their supposed passing. Pirating of the film was also allegedly encouraged. The trailer, which was first promoted on the Ain't It Cool website, again portrayed the events as real. In a time before social media was the thing, the Blair Witch took a grassroots approach. It relied on word of mouth, intrigue, and good old-fashioned fear to carry it, and my God did it pay off. It took $248.6 million at the box office after costing just $60,000 to make. This made the Blair Witch one of the most profitable movies in history. As someone who is old enough to remember the latter part of the marketing campaign, this absolutely had an impact on my first viewing experience of the Blair Witch. I distinctly remember talking about it in the playground with my friends. I watched it a couple of years after it was released, when I was still much too young enough to truly believe that this was real footage, and it's one of the only films that ever kept me up at night to this day. I believe this is why a lot of millennials have such a cult-like adoration for this movie, because while younger, newer audiences who have grown up with far more shocking cinema than this find it a bit boring, and older audiences were sensible enough to understand that this footage wasn't actually real, we were the exact age to buy into it, hook, line and sinker. Simply put, you weren't there, man. 2007's Paranormal Activity was one of the first horror movies to use virality as we know it today in their marketing strategy, and one of the only independent horror movies to repeat the same type of online success as the Blair Witch Project. Social media was new and shiny, and as film studios were quickly learning, had a younger fan base perfect to market horror movies to. Platforms such as MySpace and Facebook were also great at gathering information on prospective fans and monitoring their behaviour, which is gold dust to film studios, as it helps them tailor their promotional strategies and make them even more effective. As Ian London says, Paranormal Activity straddled the era of the internet post-Blair Witch and the new world of social media perfectly. Paramount showed sneak screenings of the film, created a website and combined this with social media campaigns and YouTube clips. It mixed traditional marketing with non-traditional. Trailers show clips of audiences from initial screenings reacting to the film, all shot on a night vision camera. Director Oren Peli's website encouraged those curious about his independent feature film to vote for where the film went next. It was even dubbed the first ever major film release decided by you. Like the websites of independent horror films before it, it added a layer of interactivity as fans felt as if they were really making a difference and were able to bring a movie they really wanted to see to their local theatre. Hashtag #TweetYourScream, where fans could share reactions, was pushed on Twitter, further circulating clips of cinema goers reacting to the scarier parts of the movie. Paranormal Activity invented React content? Jokes aside, similar to the Blair Witch, fans felt like they had a say and weren't just walking wallets. They also felt like they were supporting an authentic, independent movie, an underdog. Utilising online word of mouth and showing clips of people reacting to movies in theatres has since become a reasonably common tactic in promoting horror films. For example, 2023's It Feeds and this year's Primate both released separate audience reaction trailers. A year later, J.J. Abrams' Cloverfield followed suit. Paramount used social media and virality to create intrigue, unveiling posters of a headless Statue of Liberty without the film's title or release date, and circulating a trailer that gave next to no hints on what the found footage monster movie was about. Parker Finn's 2022 film Smile is an example of a horror film that used simple yet effective marketing outside of trailers to drum up interest. The trailers for Smile were somewhat generic for the genre these days. They showed some of the main jump scares and plot points, making the movie predictable, which is something that I will talk about later. However, what wasn't generic is where Paramount spent some of its $50 million marketing budget. baseball. On the Friday ahead of the film's release, Smile's marketing team spent some of their budget on seats right behind the home plate or home base. If you don't know what this is, because I didn't, it's the final base a baseball player must touch in order to score a home run. It's also behind where the baseball players stand to bat. Therefore, it's an area of the field that cameras, whether professional or not, are likely to be predictably focused on. Paramount had actors sit in these seats and smile directly into cameras for an uncomfortable amount of time. They also sent this poor woman out in the rain to stand behind the presenters of the Today Show. The campaign was simple, yet incredibly effective. It went viral on social media, and Smile ended up grossing $217 million worldwide, which is good going considering the film's budget was only $17 million. What Paramount did masterfully was use the power of social media, which is basically free marketing, and the potential virality of uncanny short-form content. What's more, they showcased an integral and, dare I say, iconic horror element of the film. It directly links to the main plot of the film while being vague enough not to give too much away. In 2013, the remake of 1976 horror classic Carrie pulled a similar stunt. Footage was posted to YouTube of a woman going into what appeared to be a telekinetic rage in a coffee shop in front of unsuspecting customers. The clip went viral on YouTube with 80 million views, making it the 8th most watched video that year. Taking a trip back in time, we can see that while using word of mouth via social media is a relatively new concept, these kinds of publicity stunts aren't when it comes to horror films. The Exorcist saw horror as a genre start to be taken more seriously, and I believe a lot of the film's success was down to its marketing. In Nixon's 1970s, the US was incredibly conservative, and 87% of Americans were self-identified Christians. Therefore, a film in which a little girl gets possessed by the devil was always going to cause some sort of public moral outrage. It would be borderline negligible not to capitalise on this, right? The Exorcist was therefore scheduled for release on the 26th of December, the day after most of the US had finished celebrating Jesus' birthday. Religious groups protested, and reports of alleged demonic possession spiked, which, of course, got reported on and offered the film more free publicity. The studio also leaked supposed rumours such as fires, injuries, and even deaths on set to the public to get more people talking. What's more, there were stories of people allegedly throwing up and walking out of the screenings. All of it contributed to word-of-mouth marketing. Not only did The Exorcist surpass expectations at the box office, it went on to become one of, if not the most iconic horror films in existence that put the genre on the map. On the other hand, we have plenty of horror movies where the marketing has let them down in one way or another, either hampering initial success or leaving audiences feeling misled. Some of the most disappointing horror movie marketing from this century comes courtesy of Fox Atomic, a genre division of 20th Century Fox, for Jennifer's Body in 2009. Karen Kusama and Diablo Cody's horror comedy has become something of a cult classic and a symbol of female empowerment, a far cry from the marketing strategy that was adopted upon its release. Hot off the heels of Transformers, Megan Fox was propelled into the limelight, a period of her life she describes as traumatic, and had become an international sex symbol. It was this that Fox Atomic decided to capitalise on for their marketing campaign for Jennifer's Body. Not the very cool horror movie about a girl being turned into a succubus who eats boys, which actually stands against male objectification and deals with the themes of assault, trauma, and complex female relationships. No, look at how hot Megan Fox is. No one cared about Jennifer's Body, all critics seemed to care about was Megan's. Despite Diablo Cody, a woman, mostly writing the movie for girls, the film studio marketed the film to teenage boys, resulting in a complete disconnect between the film's intended audience and the audience that showed up to see it. The marketing strategy was in complete juxtaposition to the actual messaging of the film and resulted in reviews from critics that were, well, ugh. Megan Fox's co-star, Amanda Seyfried, later said that the marketing strategy behind the 2009 horror cheapened what she describes as a perfect movie. If critics criticise anything, it would be the marketing, Seyfried said in a 2025 interview with GQ. The marketing sucked. It just did, and we all agree. Yes, Amanda, yes we do. The marketing strategy cheapened it, like it was just, a romp, Seyfried also said. A gory romp, I think they ruined it. Yara Zaid has a great video on the marketing of Jennifer's Body on her YouTube channel, so I'll link that in the description. Guillermo del Toro's 2015 gothic romance Crimson Peak is a film that completely missed the mark with its marketing, which is such a shame. The trailers depicted a cheesy ghost story that leaned on common horror tropes. They failed to capture any of the elegance or dark nature of the subject matter, which resulted in it not reaching its target audience and underperforming at the box office. In recent years, it has started to receive the recognition it deserves, but this is purely down to word of mouth, social media, and video on demand making it more accessible, rather than its initial marketing campaign, which felt as if Universal didn't even watch the film and just cobbled together random clips that people might think are scary. The release of The Fourth Kind in 2009, Universal took a leaf out of the Blair Witch Project's book and created a story-building website. Fourth Kind is a mockumentary-style alien abduction movie set in Nome, Alaska, so on this website they showed news stories from local newspapers about missing people. The issue with this was that they posted stories from very real local news outlets without permission. After facing backlash, Universal ended up having to pay the Alaska Press Club $20,000. Unfortunately, this tarnished the film somewhat, and despite seemingly gaining popularity since, it received pretty terrible reviews upon its release and only saw modest success at the box office. In contrast to this, an example of horror movie marketing that pushed ethical boundaries but actually paid off is Oz Perkins' 2025 horror comedy The Monkey. Neon released screenshots from emails between them and TV networks claiming that their trailer portrayed excessive violence and therefore wouldn't be shown. This is clever, especially as The Monkey's Final Destination-esque violence is one of its selling points. They also drove a school bus of fake decapitated cheerleaders around Hollywood, which was a ballsy move considering the ethical implications of exposing unsuspecting members of the public to graphic gore against their will. Whether you agree or disagree with this kind of publicity stunt, it definitely got people talking, which is exactly what Neon set out to do. The film had a great opening weekend. Sticking with Oz Perkins, an example of a film with great marketing that I argue might have actually hampered the reception of the film is 2024's Longlegs. Let me be clear, Neon's campaign for Longlegs was very, very good. Nicolas Cage's unsettling appearance as satanic serial killer Longlegs was kept concealed, and the plot of the film was mostly mysterious, much like Ridley Scott's campaign for Alien in 1979, where the xenomorph wasn't shown in trailers. Code, clips, and symbology appeared on posters, and an in-universe website popped up. A phone number that, when called, played pre-recorded messages from Longlegs himself was plastered on a billboard in LA. Trailers were attached to every horror film shown in theatres, and promotional videos were released on YouTube in January 2024 without so much as mentioning the film's title. Basically, Neon pulled from every successful horror movie marketing tactic. A particularly clever piece of marketing that I really loved and remember talking about in real life with my friends was a video that was released of Micah Monroe, who played FBI agent Lee Hawker. The video showed her allegedly encountering Nicolas Cage in his Longlegs makeup for the first time. The crew strapped a microphone to Monroe's chest so that we could hear her heartbeat, which reached 170 beats per minute, almost 100 more than her resting heart rate. Like the Blair Witch, Longlegs' guerrilla marketing tactics conjured intrigue. The film's budget was only $10 million, so like low-budget horror movies before it, Neon had to focus on word-of-mouth online marketing. And it worked. Longlegs raised an estimated $20 to $23 million in its opening weekend, the best opening weekend of any Neon film, and initial critics' reviews were mostly favourable. Awards Radar touted it as the best serial killer movie since The Silence of the Lambs, and we were once again told that this film was the scariest film of the decade. The marketing got people into cinemas. However, audiences were divided, with many being left mildly disappointed. The supposed scariest film of the decade was alright. For the most part, people thought it was a solid horror film, but the terror and originality the marketing campaign had promised fell a little flat. This begs the question, is the marketing actually good if the disconnect between the messaging in the campaign and the film itself leaves audiences feeling misled, confused, and even let down? I recently saw Undertone, a film I've been looking forward to watching since July 2025 after the buzz it caused at the Fantasia International Film Festival. Without boring you with a full review, I quite liked it. I thought there were some pacing issues, but the final 20 minutes were excellent, well-executed horror, and Ian Toisson, who's previously been known for his short films, did a good job with such a modest budget. The issue that I'm seeing with Undertone and other films recently is that there's a disconnect between the marketing and the art itself, which in turn causes audiences to feel deceived. Not only does it lead to knee-jerk, overly critical reactions and reviews claiming that a movie that was just fine is the worst film ever, but distrust of future projects. In this instance, A24, who have historically actually been pretty solid with their horror movie marketing, is partly to blame, but a key factor that's also playing into the displeasure of standard moviegoers is the bold claims of those who attend early screenings. Undertone was dubbed the scariest film you'll ever hear by Collider, well, one of if you read the actual review, and I get it, they're being clever. Scariest film you'll ever hear because the supernatural horror is centered around audio recordings. Great work, I get why A24 used this particular quote in their trailers. However, following initial viewings, We've been getting told by content creators and online reviewers that Undertone is one of the scariest films ever made. This brings two problems to the forefront when it comes to the age of social media: paid partnerships and the desire for virality. For legal reasons, I'm not saying that the exact tweets I'm showing on the screen in this video were paid ads. I'm just talking generally here. I'm sure some of the people who saw Undertone claimed it was the scariest film they've ever seen genuinely felt that way, but when you dig a bit deeper, you realise that this probably wasn't the case for a lot of them. Film studios and streaming services pay content creators and reviewers to post about their film, and I honestly don't have a problem with this at all. Shudder hit me up. It's the nature of social media and an incredibly effective word-of-mouth marketing strategy. There are plenty of movie content creators doing this appropriately and authentically. The issues arise when the supposedly impartial review A isn't disclosed as a paid partnership ad or sponsorship, or B cannot be impartial because the film studios specifically tell the content creator they're not allowed to say anything disparaging about their film. Even when this isn't the case and there's no contract or money exchanging hands, there's still the issue of feeling obligated to post a positive review. When most content creators are approached by a filmmaker studio or streaming platform and casually asked to check out a film, there's a subtle implication that they will post about it. The content creator potentially gets early access to an upcoming horror film that they may or may not have watched anyway, and the filmmaker gets free publicity. It makes sense for both parties. However, these content creators understandably don't want to burn any bridges or hurt potential relationships with these massive companies. The result of all these conditions is dozens of glowing reviews, all trying to get as many views as possible by making polarizing statements that are impossible for the film to live up to. Regular social media users are also guilty of this. People want their viral moment, engagement, or hit tweet, so modern online vernacular has become somewhat hyperbolic in nature. Horror movies aren't just quite tense or gory, they're the scariest, most brutal motion picture of the century. Aside from this factor, I feel like the trailers for Undertone also let it down in another way, and this is why many people left the cinema feeling a little underwhelmed. Undertone's teaser trailer, released in February 26, was excellent. It's a short, guided meditation-style video that gradually cranks up the tension, like the film does, and gives the gist of how the film makes you feel. However, the full-length trailers give the impression of a tense thrill ride that will set the hairs on the back of your neck on end throughout. It basically condenses the final 20 minutes of the film into 2 minutes, so when you sit down to watch the film, the surprisingly slow burn can feel a bit tedious and leave you wondering when the hell is something going to happen. Now, in my opinion, the final act was amazing horror, but up until this point the tension was built gradually, and when the action did hit, we'd already experienced most of the reveals in the trailer. Now, if you know me, you know I don't mind a slow burn at all, but even I was starting to fidget in my cinema seat after an hour of not much more happening than a few lights turning on and off. It wouldn't have felt so anticlimactic if the trailers hadn't basically lifted the skirt on the film's sensory pummeling of a finale. This isn't a new or unique style of trailer either. Supernatural and paranormal horror trailers have a tendency to show their entire hand in the trailer, and have done this for years now. In a subgenre that often leans a little too heavily, if you ask me, on jump scares to build and release tension, it makes sense that showcasing one or two of these in the trailer is what would entice fans of this particular brand of horror into movie theatres. However, more often than not, we're seeing all the film's main jump scares and scary plot points essentially condensed into 2 minutes and pushed to the masses. This means that when we do sit down to watch the movie, we already know that some dude who looks like Mick Thompson is going to suddenly pop up in front of the camera, or a demon is going to peer behind that guy, or some hands are going to reach out of that closet and clap. It detracts from the film's main selling point, tension, because what makes us tense isn't the jump scare itself but the anticipation of it. If we remove that anticipation because we know it's coming, what's left to be afraid of? A lot of people love 2012 Sinister, and I get why, but the trailer showed us Gabagool, or whatever his name is, several times. It also lays out some of the major plot points, such as Ellison burning the tapes, which doesn't occur in the movie until the final act. It also shows us 99% of the main jump scares and reveals, leaving very little mystery, which I would argue is crucial in a subgenre in which the same trope has been rehashed so many times. Sinister is far from alone in this style of trailer. Insidious's showed arguably its main jump scare and most iconic scene. Similarly, 2008's remake of the brilliant Spanish film Rec, Quarantine, shows the final scene of the movie in the trailer and the poster. So what's the solution to this? In a genre where fear is the currency and what's ultimately going to pull in audiences, how else are you going to market your film other than showing what's going to scare people who want to be scared? Hereditary's trailers centered around the daughter, Charlie. It framed her as a creepy kid and played on society's prejudices. It did a perfect job of showing us scary moments from the film that would hook horror audiences while gently guiding us in a certain direction and omitting the movie's first major twist. Going into the cinema, moviegoers were convinced that they were about to see another film about a little girl being possessed. Therefore, when this little girl gets taken out by a lamppost in shocking fashion in the first act, we're left confused, nonplussed, bamboozled even. We now have no idea what direction the movie is about to take or what's in store. When the scene in question happened, I gasped out loud, which is something I never do because I'm very cool, and I know others watching the movie for the first time had a similar reaction. What A24 did perfectly was balance reeling in horror lovers with jump scares and certain plot points with intrigue, mystery, and genuine shock. 4 years later, we saw 20th Century Studios adopt a similar tactic with Zach Cregger's Barbarian. Initial trailers focused on the first act of the film, insinuating that Keith was the bad guy. It preyed upon our bias as Bill Skarsgård, who played a strange man who had accidentally double-booked himself into an Airbnb with a woman, had now become widely known as Pennywise the Clown from the It reboot and its sequel. The trailers played further into this, as they made it clear that Barbarian had the same producer as It. Audiences therefore rightly or wrongly typecast him in their own minds, and, with the help of a cleverly edited trailer, assumed that we would once again be seeing Skarsgård take up a villainous role. How wrong we were, R.I.P. Keith. Steven Spielberg recently revealed that he won't be showing any footage from the final act of his newest sci-fi film Disclosure Day in marketing, and I'm hoping that now Big Steve has done it, other filmmakers will follow suit. The trailers for Weapons, Cregger's 2025 quirky horror film, were along the same vein. The trailers didn't necessarily display misdirection, but they told us so little we might as well have gone in blind. This was a bit polarizing. Some horror fans, like myself, had fun, while others felt as if, given the tone of the trailer, they had been led to believe they were about to see an out-and-out horror movie, and when they weren't met with this, they were angry and confused. Ultimately, though, it got people talking and meant that almost everyone left the cinema with something to say. Another way film studios should be marketing their horror movies, in my opinion, is by focusing more on their teaser trailers. If it were up to me, all trailers would be teasers. In fact, I've actively stopped watching full trailers since Undertone, unless I'm at the cinema, where I may have to start plugging my ears and covering my eyes. 2004's Resident Evil Apocalypse teaser is a great example of a teaser trailer done right. Titled Regenerate, it appeared to be an advert for a skin rejuvenation product created by Umbrella Corporation, but at the end, the woman in the advert turns into a zombie. When film studios have under a minute to get you to see their film, they have to get really creative. They hook you in without giving too much away. This way, audiences get enough of an idea of what the film is actually about, while still maintaining an air of mystery and tension. While social media marketing will continue to be hugely effective at getting people to see horror movies in the cinema, there is also another factor that film companies have to consider: video on demand. It's no longer enough to just get people to see their movie on opening weekend. They have to look beyond that. Streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon Prime are willing to pay astronomical amounts of money to film studios for the licensing rights to their pictures. For example, in January of this year, Netflix and Sony announced a $7 billion pay-one multi-year licensing deal. This means that film studios can't just aim for a great cinema run anymore with the hope of selling merch and making sequels. They have to also look at longevity. According to Ian London in Hollywood Online, the large film studios are aware of this and aiming for this. In fact, to ignore this, I would argue, would be financially irresponsible. Not only do film studios want these initial deals to come to fruition, they also want them to be renewed, and in order for that to happen, people have to be streaming their movies. If the big film studios genuinely want longevity, as they say, then a more creative, honest approach while maintaining some sense of mystery and tension is needed. Otherwise, we're going to continue seeing a disconnect between fans and the art. Horror fans may turn up in our droves to see their latest horror movie on the big screen, but are we going to rent it or buy it and encourage others to do the same if we feel as if we were misled and let down? Fortunately, we have been seeing some really cool campaigns recently. Passenger are doing a great job with planting flyers with QR codes and symbols, which lead to a mysterious website and eerie dashcam footage. For Obsession and the highly anticipated Backrooms, we're getting faux infomercials and, with the latter, incredibly vague teasers and stills, which capitalise on existing fans' knowledge and anticipation of the web series adaptation. Ultimately, these are all good signs, so watch this space.